Outnumbered overtime. Oh, gee, baby, we missed you guys yesterday. I think people probably understand that when we have really, oh, thank you. Did I like sit on my glasses? I'll be blind later. People understand that when we have really hard-breaking news, especially news that happens during the show, sometimes we won't do the online version because this airs in a loop. So it gets a little...
Plus, you've got a lot more to weigh in on regarding Charlie
to go
Sheen.
dig through and oh, yeah. But and then there are just some topics that you don't do at that particular moment while you're also having to go chase
like
down
Charlie
news.
Sheen.
Yeah. So today, I mean, we did have some breaking developments, but now we're waiting for that next big meeting. President Obama, Francois Hollande from Paris, and then Putin. They're going to meet across Thanksgiving week next week.
You know what's really interesting to me is turn the clock back, 12 years, and the French were being castigated as surrender monkeys. Mm-hmm. And remember, we got rid of French fries and we implemented freedom fries and all. Who's leading the charge now? It's really interesting the way that the wheel turns, isn't it?
It's very sad the way the wheel turns because they're leading the charge because look how many times they've been hit. Mm-hmm. And with that train to Paris, if our guys hadn't been on it.
Can you imagine?
Well, and purportedly the mastermind in this had something to do with that planning as well. So, I mean, I
was hoping that this would give the president the excuse to go into the fold. When you have...
It did give the president
France
that.
and Russia, but it doesn't seem
he's
like
not
he's
doing
taking it. I mean, you have France and Russia getting together. France, a solid ally. I mean, asking for our help, you would assume. I mean, you would bet that this meeting, I'd like to be a fly on the wall where it says, what the hell are you doing? Can you please get in here and help us? You hear about, the Russian Navy communicating with the French Air Force as they're in the region, that this would be the opening where the president could almost save face and not say he was really changing his strategy, but commit and get involved behind those other two. I still don't even feel like he's going to do that.
He doesn't want to. And I think he was hoping that nothing would happen and he could just pass it on to the next leader. That's not the case. But then there's the question, how much do you want President Obama getting involved if he's not really committed to the mission?
That's what I'm asking on the live chat right now.
Well, look at that.
57% of people in a Harvard Institute study are saying that they now support some form of action on the ground from the United States.
It's not necessarily... I'm not talking about the public's perception. I'm talking about putting men and women in harm's way with a commander-in-chief that's half-hearted about war. I mean, if there's not a specific strategy that he's committed to in the way that George W. Bush was committed to it, and we have these rules of engagement that you hear members of the military say are just, crippling. Do you want President Obama sending thousands of Americans into battle? And I put that question out there because it's almost like we're pushing the president and he's going kicking and screaming and he's saying, I don't want to go. And we're saying, well, we want you to go. Do we really want him to go if he doesn't want to go?
Well, if you give the generals what they needed, I'm not saying carte blanche either, but you give them the authority and the latitude to do what they need to do, then you're in a situation where you would have a greater chance of an outcome that's success. But if you're going to go in there and you're going to, as NATO did during the Kosovo conflict, have to approve every target, get consensus on everything, say you can do this but you can't do that, then you might as well just keep up the status quo because nothing will change.
And that's how we've learned from reports, and you know this better than anyone, John, that's how this White House has operated. The White House, that West Wing, seems to be the one dictating the strategy to the DOD and being intricately involved in all the decisions and not really trusting the generals. I'm not sure that this administration does. They're not now.
During the press conference yesterday, I think I watched most of it, and at one point, President Obama said, I think people want me to come up here and visibly look, do you remember
more
this
bluster?
moment?
Yeah. Bellicose. More bellicose.
I think we've said that on our show a lot. We were like, we just want a president to stand up there and look mad and look like we're going to come get him and look more aggressive. And he referenced that. But that has to happen in real time. Organically.
Yeah. Well, we have seen him like that on climate change.
And he says, if I act like that, that doesn't change anything.
So I was watching Twitter last night, and one of my favorite people on Twitter is sitting across the couch, and she tweeted something about climate change and fighting the Islamic State. Would you share that? Because what did you have, like 1,300 likes
a
or
Twitter
something?
Rampage?
Yeah. And I was like, I was eating a snack, and I was like, all right, I'll sit here and read some Andrea.
People seem to like that one. I was just thinking about it, reading the headlines of Bernie Sanders and President Obama and John Kerry all saying climate change is the greatest threat that we're facing, and also believing that climate change is fueling jihadism. I mean, I think that's
or created it in some areas that I've read.
If you're a student of history, this is a multi-millennial war.
Okay.
Unless climate change has been going on
it?
since 600 AD.
Obama, this
But they're
is
not.
Andrea Tantaros,
Yeah.
Twitter. Obama thinks jihadists need jobs. Hillary thinks they need democracy. Bernie thinks they need solar panels. I think they need a dirt nap.
That's a different one.
That's a different one, but
she was on.
I can see why she's
for a
one
while.
of your favorites.
Oh yeah.
But
I
just
grab
think
a snack and I just
Let
sit with
me
my
follow
phone.
you
As a
right
Democrats
now.
think that,
you know, I am following.
that climate change causes terrorism, it's too bad that they don't believe that terrorism causes climate change, because maybe then they would fight it.
Wow.
Oh, that is a good one.
So I asked the question that we've been talking about.
We
that
could
Andrew
work that out. We could work that logic out. I mean, we could get there and write a paper about that. And you've given me a
Commission
new
a study.
idea.
No, you
Yes.
could, because you're so super smart.
No,
Right,
climate
a thesis, Miss Harvard.
Yes, they're causing climate change. I mean, if climate change can cause jihadism, why can't we turn it around? We could. We could find a way.
She's going to have that by Friday.
Put
By Friday, you'll have
on that.
This I
Okay,
want to read.
so I want to go back to something that somebody had just put on the live chat. Where is it? Captain Shadrax, I hope I'm saying that right, says no U.S. troops until the rules of engagement get changed drastically
That's
and
what
take
Andrea
the
was
cuffs
saying.
off our troops. So that was a question that I asked. And so now people are getting back on that. Should we lead? Only if we have a leader. Otherwise, we may need to stay out of the way so they don't get hurt. Just support Russia and France for the next 14 months. Silver Money Man. I'm just reading them. Brad VG says, I missed the Charlie Sheen segment. What is his prognosis?
Do you want to reprise it? Let's listen.
Sadly, he is HIV positive. We believe he's healthy. I know I had been reading that Charlie Sheen was taking the proper treatments and
He looks
feeling
better
good,
than he's looked in a long time, to be
according
honest.
to published reports.
For a lot of people, it's a chronic condition now, and so there's a good chance that he'll live to be a ripe old age, which will give him plenty of time for advocacy if what he says is true. Back to Syria for a minute, you know, and I know you had General Keane here on the couch, and we talked about him a lot over the last hour, but it was interesting, this briefing that we had from General Keane and his associates just before the show. He thinks that the key to all of this is a peace deal in Syria, that you have to stop the fighting in Syria between the Assad regime and the rebels in order for everybody to turn their attention toward ISIS. But the interesting thing about that is then you give up on this idea, at least in the near term, of getting rid of Assad. You've got to allow him to stay in power.
That's
and
interesting.
then Assad builds up his reputation as I am the last bastion between civilization and 6th century Islamic rule. And so does that buy him more time? You know, he's a very shrewd guy, and he's got a very powerful ally in Putin, but now very sound analysts like Jack Keener saying that he needs to stay at least for a while in order to get rid of ISIS in Syria.
Well, one thing that, not to put words in your mouth like you couldn't speak on your own, Andrea, but one thing that has impressed me about what Andrea has been saying for months is that, well, what is the alternative? Because, I mean, if you're going to remove him, what we tried in Iraq right away didn't work. We removed him with, we removed
Libya.
Saddam. Well, we removed Saddam Hussein with somebody we liked, and how did that work out exactly? Now we're beholden to, every time we take a step in Syria, we got to check with home base in Baghdad. How's that going? Well, I'll tell you how it's going. France just got hit, and they walked around us like we stink. I mean, they're going and doing what they need to do.
Hussein, Mubarak, Gaddafi.
Yeah.
You know, there was an interesting...
there's a pattern here.
There was an interesting article in the New York Times yesterday suggesting that unless Western nations come to the plate on ISIS, nothing's going to get done, because the Kurds don't have an interest in getting rid of ISIS. They have an interest in protecting their own territory. The presence of ISIS in Iraq keeps the Shiite government there off balance. The Turks are worried more about the Kurds than they're worried about ISIS. The Saudis don't really care too much about ISIS because they're not in Saudi Arabia. Their biggest enemy is Iran. This article also went on to say that Israel is just sitting there looking at Arabs, you know, Hezbollah fighting Arabs, Syria falling apart, Iran now, you know, involved in this, and nobody's talking about the Palestinian plight. So for a lot of people, there are some advantages to a continued presence of ISIS in that region. So unless we and France and other Western allies get on the stick and prop up the indigenous forces who can get rid of ISIS and create the conditions on the ground there for success, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, these leaders aren't ideal, but to to think that we can install democracy somehow. I mean, I really, and I
we tried that.
They want it.
We tried that in
they
Gaza.
want it. Maybe that's not what they want.
Well, I'm very critical of Republicans on this. I mean, I think that when we went into Iraq, it was one thing to go look for the WMD, and when we didn't find them, we should have handed the keys over to the highest-ranking Sunni general and say, if you harbor terrorists or foster terrorism, we will be back and we will flatten you, and leave. But this whole democracy promotion idea, and then when Bremer came in and had the soldiers, he said, take your weapons and go home. That's when we saw that Sunni insurgency created. I mean, we've meddled a lot in the region, and arguably we've made it worse. And the same thing with Assad. I mean, I've been saying, why all this hostility? I mean, he's not a good guy, but Christians were arguably better under Bashar al-Assad than they are now. Same thing with Saddam Hussein. And now we're finally seeing Americans, Republicans and Democrats coming around to stop all this irrational hate for Vladimir Putin and for Assad. I'm glad. Good.
No, I totally agree with you. And I do think that trying to spread democracy is a lost cause and is not even a principle that makes sense any longer. I mean, it's one of those things, if you want it, you can fight for it. Maybe we'll come in late. I mean, it's not our business. But ISIS is out of control, and they're coming to kill us on our own territory. And I think that, unfortunately, those two things that you're talking about now are separate. That this idea that we have to go in and force democracy on people, no, right? I agree, but we still have to go do something about ISIS.
What's interesting you say that is, I agree with that. If you're going to go in and just use military to take out a threat and leave, that's one thing. But what's interesting is Hillary Clinton was the one at the Democratic debate talking about how we needed to go into Libya because it's what the people wanted. I mean, that Samantha Power version of nation building that's very, very scary.
Which people?
For folks on the right and the far left.
I think the Libyan outcome is probably more likely in Syria than
the 7 rioters that supposedly wanted jobs in falafel stands.
Peggy Britton is upset because she couldn't get signed on. And Peggy, you have to click on the live chat and you get in through, and they'll list a number. I get in through my Twitter. Some people use their Facebook. So I know you sound frustrated. I'm so sorry you didn't get to see.
But if she's not on, did she just hear those?
No, she said she's watching. She just can't get on the live chat.
Oh, on the live chat.
David of the U.S. Marine Corps 66. I don't see or really hear anybody talking about the liberal policies of France. How much do you think these played in a recent attack? I know, Andrea, you talked about it on the couch before because you lived in Paris. Yep. So we'll talk about it more next time. And that will be tomorrow.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.